Good morning. I was reading the comments from my friends from ADL and were interviewed by Peter from SDA Q&A. And I was listening to let's see. Let me pull it up. Okay. So I was reading a lot of comments. I was really dismayed about what people say about Adventism. What is the bondage in the world that we're set free from exactly? Was it following God, or was it sin? We're set free from sin. Adventists don't enforce any rules that aren't biblical, that God said is good, that Jesus forgive us for breaking, that we can keep. Not being under the law in the Bible are people who didn't receive Jesus and thought they were saved by the law. Adventists don't think that. And by the way, any proper Christian denomination that denies this is misunderstanding the Bible. He didn't set us free from following God. He set us free from sin and death. And it's funny because people like Answering Adventism, when they interview there and they talk about Adventists being oppressive, they basically have that same theology, just in a more inconsistent way, it seems to me, because they think you have to keep the 10 Commandments or you're sinning, and that believers grow in the knowledge of God and come into agreement to do those things because they're good. And so a lot of these criticisms fall woefully short. It's like attacking something that you agree with, you're just less consistent about. Also, let me see here. If you read Galatians and think you're not justified by the law. Hey, Timothy, good morning. So that's true. We don't believe that either. We're Wesleyan. Are Wesleyans heretics too because they oppress people? It's like, maybe Peter can have me on because maybe I could come on and talk about the oppressiveness of the Presbyterian Church in America, because they actually did stuff like bought and sold chattel slaves, and when we're confronted about it, chose not to speak out against it, while Ellen White was rebuking everyone for the evil sin of buying and selling human beings. Maybe Peter would have me on and interview me about the problem of Calvinism and God not actually loving everybody and the atonement being limited. Maybe Peter would have me on to talk about how Jesus didn't die for everybody, so that everyone could be saved if they believe by faith. Maybe he could have me on. We could talk about the perverse notion that God's going to torture people without end forever for finite crime. Maybe Peter could have me on. We could talk about the atrocities committed in Geneva against humanity because of Calvinist theology. If we're going to talk about theology making the difference between how people's lives are, since Adventist theology is so bad, maybe I could talk about children being executed at Geneva for misbehaving, or Michael Servetus being killed because he was a Unitarian, because he's a heretic, so they burned him at the stake, or they hung him. Ellen White didn't hang anybody. Adventists didn't own a single slave because of their theology. Well, the Presbyterians, I think there's an idol, a giant statue of that guy down somewhere where they started, where they built their church on slavery. Now, I don't think Presbyterians aren't Christians. I just think their theology allowed them to do some atrocities that weren't possible in Adventist theology, and Ellen White spoke about this at that time. Or maybe we could talk about how Presbyterian or Miles theology says God determines every sin committed with specificity, including every thrust of the child rapist, and that every sin committed couldn't be otherwise because God determined it for his glory, of course. Maybe we could talk about that. If we're going to talk about the damage of certain theologies, that the damage it could potentially have. My Jesus is Lord of the Sabbath. My Jesus loves all humanity, and they have to come to him by faith. And he wants them to, and he weeps over the fact that they don't. But he is also a God of sovereignty, and he will judge evil. My Jesus set us free from sin and death, not from God's ways. Presbyterians should agree with me on that. Now, maybe Peter would have me on to talk about that. And why the criticisms of those who leave Adventism, because they read the book of Galatians and they think that Jesus saved them from the bad Old Testament God. And that's a misunderstanding of the love of God who saves us from sin and rebellion. Or maybe we could talk about the fruit of the Adventist church. Ellen White's direction in this area to buy land. We have more schools than any Protestant denomination. Christian schools where we teach the Bible. Or the hospitals we have, second to none in the Protestant world. No one has more schools or hospitals than we do. That's the fruit of our ministry. Or maybe how we have 20 million compared to our 2 million in America where our church started, because we're outreach spreading the gospel of Jesus. And we recognize the fact that Baptists, Methodists, Presbyterians, other Protestants at least, we recognize their missionary work is spreading the gospel and fulfilling the Great Commission. We don't say they're not fulfilling the Great Commission. We believe they are, even though we disagree with their doctrines. Maybe we could talk about that, the fruit of that. Maybe. I find the criticisms pretty pathetic. Anyways, maybe Peter could have me on and we could talk about, since we're criticizing each other and all, we'll talk about the fruit and the comparison. Let's compare limited atonement to the investigative judgment, which has nothing to do with you working for your salvation, because we believe in righteousness by faith. Let's go. If you want to go deep, we're going to start criticizing each other. Let's do that. Maybe Peter will have me on to do that. I'll be nice. I like Presbyterians, usually. I actually think they are Christians, even though I think they get a lot of stuff wrong. But, I can dream. God bless.